Hello there, welcome to The Comments, a collaborative project by Espresso Global and Ukrainian media. I am Olena Solodovnikova, and it's great pleasure for me to be joined by Kornely Kakachia, a professor of political science and director of the Tbilisi-based think tank Georgian Institute of Politics. Hello, Kornely.
Hello.
First of all, of course, I want to ask you about the law of foreign agents, because of which Georgian people came out to protests. What was the had outraged people the most?
Yeah, I think this law, which was brought second time now, Georgian Dream government, actually infuriated many Georgians because, and also friends of Georgia and international organizations like EU and some others, because Georgian government promised last year that they will scrap this law and they will not return back. But now it seems like since the Georgian government doesn't have much to offer in terms of economic prosperity or any other breakthrough in social and economic life, they decided to use this law to deepen the polarization and radicalization of Georgian politics. So basically, main idea behind of this is somehow to make people talk about this law and to overshadow some other more acute social and economic problems which exist in Georgia.
Oh, yeah, but except of that, the West has hardly criticized the project and emphasized that it does not match to Georgia's Western course. However, the head of the ruling Georgian Dream party, Irakli Garibashvili, said that the country authorities would be able to repeal the law on foreign agents quickly if Georgia were to join the European Union. Who is closer to the truth, in your opinion?
I think this is absolutely absurd because, it means that there is some sort of, I would say, internal, some sort of misunderstanding there. Because, one part of the Georgian Dream says that we want to be part of the European Union, and another says is that, like for former Prime Minister, that we are not ready for EU membership.
All ruling party,
yes.
They have no one opinion about it. That
exactly, because they have very contradictory statements. Because one of the reasons why they have this, because there's the election, and the main aim of the Georgian Dream is now to gain the constitutional majority, which is not an easy one, and that's why they're now trying to mobilize pro-Western as well as social conservative part of Georgian society. So that's why they're playing with both sides, because they know that if they alienate, for instance, pro-Western electorate, then they may not get this majority, and that's why they have this very confusing and contradictory statements.
Yes, but if the fight against the foreign agents seems as an indicator of the growing Russian influence in Georgia.
Yeah, this is true. It's not only Russian influence, but we also, last year, Georgia surprisingly signed a strategic agreement with China, which, whatever that means, which is also very strange, because, and even ruling parties signed the agreement with Chinese Communist Party, a kind of strategic agreement. And just to give you an example, that when Georgian Prime Minister went to Brussels, second day when he arrived back, he met the Chinese ambassador. This is the indication that Georgia is actually moving only now officially to the so-called multivectoral foreign policy. So even though formally in Georgian constitution we have Euro-Atlantic, orientation, in reality it seems like Georgian Dream wants to somehow to employ this multivectoralism, and that's where Russia comes as well, because basically this law also echoes what Russia wants to see in Georgia. And if you follow the statements from Moscow, this is what they want in Georgia, and they support this kind of enactment, because Russia still thinks that Georgia's European integration is not irreversible, and they think that they can influence Georgian politics through their, oligarchic networks or their own networks in Georgia to derail Georgia from Euro-Atlantic integration.
Yes, but could you elaborate on cooperation with Georgia and China? What are the interests of Georgians in China?
I think one of the reasons is that Georgian government feels a little bit more pressure from European Union and West in general. So they're trying to, with the strategic links with China, they're trying to blackmail West that if they will push too much, in terms of reforms or democratization or some other things, they always hinting that then they will maybe move towards China. And that's why they signed this agreement with China. So basically they make EU to somehow to consider the situation. And like, to give you an example, last year Georgia has to fulfill 12 recommendations. Georgian government just fulfilled 3. But even in that condition, the European Union gave Georgia candidate status, even though it just fulfills 3 recommendations. So basically, main idea behind of this was geostrategic and geopolitical, because you understand that if they push too much Georgian government, they can move more toward China or Russia or some other authoritarian states, and that it seems like they manage blackmail quite well, the European Union. But I don't know if that will work this year, because as you know, this year Georgia still needs to fulfill these 9 steps. And it's unlikely that Georgia will fulfill this until the end of the year, because there's not so much time, especially with this kind of law, which they just now trying to adopt. It's absolutely non-starter to expect some sort of progress with the negotiations with the EU.
Yes, I want to backstep to the Russian influence, and could Russia be interested in promoting the law of transparency on foreign influence in Georgia to destabilize country, and in what way?
Yes, of course, Russia is interested basically to have a similar law in other neighbor countries, and just look the countries where it was adopted: Kyrgyzstan, some other countries, Belarus, and we just see that when countries adopt this kind of law, then they become typical authoritarian countries. And same thing for Georgia. Then when Georgia, if Georgia getting away from European Union, it's getting very close to Russia and China and some other countries. So I think that's what Russia understood. So that's why for them it's important, and they try to support also the current government. Just to give you an example, last year, also this year, a few months ago, Russian officials told South Ossetian authorities, local separatist authorities, that they should not irritate Georgia during the election. So, and there was some other statement when they stripped the Russian citizenship to 3 so-called South Ossetian MPs, because they were, demanding some sort of territorial claims toward Georgia. And this is just several indications how Russia is trying to keep this current regime, because of course they know that if opposition will win, this could Russia can lose this influence which they have now in Georgia.
And about the authoritarianism, always it speculates on protection of the rights of citizens from the foreign influence. And the government should decide that people can watch, to listen to. Do you feel that beginning of authoritarian processes in Georgia?
Yes, I think this is already kind of emerging authoritarianism, which we already see, but a lot of things depends how the people in society will respond to this. And good thing is that civil society is very vibrant in Georgia. That's why, government wants to bring this law, because they see civil society and free media as a challenger for the ruling regime, and because they quite successfully managed to marginalize opposition, so they don't expect major challenge from them. And that's main idea of the kind of this law, is to put together civil society and free media and opposition and to show them like a radical force which wants derail Georgia from the democratic developments. And I think But the thing is that the Georgian society has to answer to this, because at the end of the day, of course, the Western countries can help Georgia, but it's up to the Georgian people what they will choose. And we have good chances for that, because upcoming parliamentary election will be the litmus test for Georgian voters to decide what kind of government and what kind of foreign policy orientation they want.
Well, by Georgian ruling party, Georgian Dream announced a rally near the parliament in support of draft of law of transparency of foreign influence. Does this party really have any real supporters, or can be compared to the Ukrainian Party of Regions, which forced to state employees to attend the rallies?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities, which some people actually they compare this government with the previous Ukrainian government. But we should understand one thing, that behind of this ruling party, there's an oligarch. And in Georgia, we have only one oligarch. So there's no two, third or fourth oligarch like in Ukraine who could balance him. And that's a major problem there because in this kind of situation, it's very easy to monopolize power, and this is what they did. And they have also all this informational propaganda on their side, plus administrative resources. And of course, they're trying to mobilize this kind of resources in order to show some strength. And unfortunately, there's some part of Georgian society who still support this kind of government, because they try to use the cleavages existing. For instance, in a social conservative part of Georgia, as you know, Georgia is a very conservative country, so they're just bringing some cleavages which is existing there against minorities, against some other issues, which is kind of artificial, but they're trying to bring this issue and to hide the serious issues which is related to social and economical problems which Georgia is facing.
I wanted to back for Russians, sorry. After the first Russian wave of mobilization had begun, many Russians tried to flee to Georgia. How many of them are staying there on what terms?
Yeah, actually, at the beginning, we had almost more than 100,000 Russian citizens residing in Georgia, but last year, half of them, they left because they didn't feel comfortable in Georgia. First of all, they don't know language, and also I think the Georgian society very strongly supports Ukraine, and I think they understood that they are not really welcome here. Also, another reason was that they didn't feel they could not integrate in Georgian society. They were kind of a little bit isolated, and that was the main reason they moved. Mostly they moved to Serbia and some other countries, but we still have some part of the Russian citizens who still kind of reside. But even some people who are from opposition of the Putin, even they are not that much popular among Georgians, especially among young people, because major question which young Georgians asking them, why you could not manage to stop the authoritarians in Russia, because you as a Russian voter, you created this monster, and even if Ukraine prevails in this war, neither Ukraine, neither West can change the Putin's regime. So it is your job to do this. Of course, this Russian opposition they have their own arguments why they could not, and they just always claim that several 100,000 of Russian opposition they are in jail and everything. So there's a kind of misunderstanding between these two sides as well. And I think this also, and sometimes a lot of young Georgians, they also question if to be against Putin means that they are truly against the Russian imperialists, because sometimes they have doubts that some of these political emigres, they may have some grievances against Putin, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are refusing to or they're just refusing these imperial ideas about Russia. So these are the kind of major differences, and that's why Georgian youth and all these young people, I mean, mostly these Russians, they were young people, they didn't get along.
Yes, could you elaborate on the imperialistic habits of Russians, how they provide these habits in Georgia?
Yes, I think this is quite clear that Russia, especially under the Putin's regime, they want to recreate some sort of new type of empire. Of course, it will not be Soviet Union with the name, but of course it will be something like Eurasian Union. The main idea behind of this idea, which Putin voiced several times, as we know, is that they should recreate this kind of Eurasian empire, which should be kind of on par with European Union, United States, in China. But the truth is that Russia is not able economically or even politically to create such an empire, because first of all, Russia doesn't have a soft power to use against to neighbors. And a good example here is Georgia, Ukraine, some other countries, because when they understand that they could not use the soft power, they're trying to use this hard power. And this is what we see in 2008 in Georgia, what we see now, this ongoing Russian aggression in Ukraine. And of course, this shows that Russian soft power doesn't work, and they don't have any persuasion power to impact on the neighbors. So Russia is not a democracy. So that's why people don't really want to copy their model of the governance. Russia cannot offer anything in terms of education, to young people from the neighborhood countries. And that's why the young people, they don't have any specific feeling towards Moscow. So I think the Russians understood this, and that's why now they're trying to use this hard power and somehow to change the history. But as we see, this is not going well. And I think the result of the war in Ukraine will show to many Russians that they were mistaken. You cannot really create empire on force, and you cannot force your neighbor to lose their independence and just to refuse their national identity.
Yes, you say that relations between Georgian and Russians have always been toxic, and could you briefly recall the historical context of these contradictions, except of 2008, of course, the war, from the history?
Yeah, I think Russian-Georgian relations started in 1801, when Russia actually occupied Georgia, even though Russia promised, Russian Empire promised to protect Georgia, and there was no indication that they should incorporate Georgia in Russian Empire. And of course, since then, Georgia, there was a lot of resentment against Russian rule in Georgia. And of course, time to time, there was a lot of revolts against Russian Empire. Most of them were, of course, unsuccessful. But then after Russian Revolution, there was a window opportunity when we had in 1918 and 21, we had the first democratic Georgian Republic. And I think during these 3 years, this was very instrumental for Georgia, because even though it was not a long term, but many Georgians, they lived, they still kind of appreciate this time. And interestingly, this republic actually was recognized by Russia as an independent country, and Georgia even was ready to claim their neutrality, but Georgia actually put the status as a neutral country, but it didn't help them to avoid the incorporation to the Soviet Union. And as you know, Joseph Stalin and Sergei Gergian, the two Georgians, actually were the master, behind of this plan. And then Georgia again became by force, part of the Soviet Union. And this is just one of the reminder what does the neutrality means for Russia. Sometimes neutrality is just kind of like something between their strategic gains, because they don't see. Maybe one exception was the Finland, and as you know, there was a term called Finlandization, and even during the Cold War, Finland was formally kind of sovereign country, but they didn't have a actually many independent choices in terms of foreign and foreign policy. Now, when Finland has a chance to become member of NATO, they use this opportunity, and then we know that because they also understand, they know Russia quite well, and they understand that with present Russia, it is impossible to stay as a neutral country, even though you could be a member of the European Union. This is one of the examples and lessons for Russian neighbors, like how Russia treats the so-called concept of neutrality, or Finlandization of this region, which sometimes time to time we hear before the Ukrainian war, but from Western expert community as well as from Russian officials.
Definitely. At the end, I wanted to ask you about the Saakashvili. Georgian President Zurabishvili commented on the possible pardon of imprisoned former President Mikhail Saakashvili and called it all our own moral responsibility. In Ukraine, Saakashvili is considered a political prisoner. What is the attitude to him in Georgia now?
I think it is, as you know, Saakashvili is is very polarizing. There's some people who actually likes him and they appreciate what he did, especially maybe during his first term. But there's some people who actually oppose him and they don't have any sympathy towards him. So you cannot say that he's unlike in Ukraine, where he's more popular. He is very controversial in many ways for Georgians. So that's why we don't have any consensus about that, because some people just don't see his future in the Georgian politics. But there's some people of Georgian voters, you can say like 25%, 20-25%, who still supports him. But of course, a lot of things will depend, what will be the outcome of this parliamentary election. If opposition wins, probably there will be some opportunity, for him to free him. But it's very difficult now, because it's also issue which Georgian Dream ruling party using, because he understands that Saakashvili's rule, especially last 5 years, was not that popular, and they try to use his image during the election for those Georgians who actually have no sympathy towards him.
Yes, and could Saakashvili be killed like Navalny in Russia? Is it possible in Georgia?
I don't know that one, but I don't think so, because in Georgian society, fortunately, it's not Russia, and I think that whatever authoritarian ruling party you may have, they could not do this, because Georgia is a very small country, and people will react, even though they may not agree with many things about what Saakashvili was doing. But if there will be something against personal, probably there will be reaction, and that's why Georgian government understand. But of course, it doesn't mean that there's no risks. The risk is always there, because we should not also exclude this some risk which is still existing.